Will the convicted armorer in the Rust movie shooting case be forced to testify in Alec Baldwin's upcoming manslaughter trial? Seems like prosecutors sure want that to happen. We're going to break down these latest legal filings and a new lawsuit, all with attorney Lisa Torraco, who represents one of the key players in this case. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Big update in the upcoming New Mexico criminal trial of actor Alec Baldwin. Prosecutors seem to be trying to force Baldwin's co-defendant, Hannah Gutierrez-Reed, to testify. I'm going to explain this. So, Alec Baldwin, as you know, has been charged with involuntary manslaughter for the shooting death of cinematographer Halyna Hutchins on the movie set Rust back in 2021. This is when an 1880s era prop gun, allegedly being held by the actor and producer on the film, discharged during a rehearsal. And a live round somehow made its way into that firearm. And that bullet struck not only Halyna, but also director Joel Souza, who was injured but survived. Now, recently, the armorer on the set, Hannah Gutierrez-Reed, was convicted of her own charge of involuntary manslaughter on a trial that we covered on Law&Crime. We focused a lot here on Sidebar. And she was ultimately sentenced to the maximum of 18 months in prison. Now, arguably, some of the most incriminating testimony against her was from her own words in her initial statements to police and her interrogation.
I just kind of wish that any of my coworkers could stop seeing me because I already feel super bad.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, hold on just 1 second.
I can even throw you in mine. I have an unmarked one.
Is it closed?
It's like right. We walked through them.
Okay, cool.
So.
Yeah, I don't want to go back.
Okay.
I just want to get the out of here and never show my face in this industry ever again.
Well, I wouldn't say that.
Oh, I would.
How long have you been working here?
Just a month.
Just a month?
Yeah. I've just been doing this job for like 9 months now.
Okay. How old are you?
24. I'm like the only female armorer in the game, and I just up my whole entire career.
Have you studied armory, or did you go to classes, or how did you get into it?
My dad's one of the best armorers in the entire world, and he trained me, and I'm a failure.
This one is exactly what it looked like was in there.
Okay. And that one doesn't have any holes.
So that's yeah. Honestly, that box of dummies might have some wonky ones in it. And we got that, I think, a week ago.
Have you ever, in your history of working, encountered live rounds on the set?
Never.
Okay. And how do you know that?
Because every dummy I've ever shaken has been a dummy, and the other ones have holes in the side, and I've never experienced a round that looked like a dummy and behaved like a blank or anything. So, yeah, I am shaking all of them most of the time.
Now, before we go any further, Hannah Gutierrez-Reed was adamant during her trial that she was innocent, that she wasn't responsible for what happened, that she wasn't given enough time to do safety checks, that Alec Baldwin was a controlling force that forced her to rush and he went off script. And in fact, before she was officially sentenced, listen to what she had to say.
Your Honor, when I took on Rust, I was young and I was naive, but I took my job as seriously as I knew how to. Despite not having proper time, resources, and staffing, when things got tough, I just did my best to handle it. Today, I humbly ask you to consider probation, a probation where I can contribute to society through community service, and I can continue my counseling, and I welcome any classes that you may deem necessary for me to attend. I give you my word now that I would strictly follow the rules and respect the parameters of that probation. I beg you, please don't give me more time. The jury has found me in part at fault for this god-awful tragedy, but that doesn't make me a monster. That makes me human.
Now, why do I say all that? Why do I give this little background? Well, Alec Baldwin's trial is scheduled for July. It's right around the corner. And there is a very interesting thing the prosecution seems to be doing. And for that, I want to bring in New Mexico criminal defense attorney Lisa Torraco, who represents Dave Halls in this case. He was the first assistant director on the Rust set who pled no contest to negligent use of a deadly weapon for how he handled the gun and his role in the shooting. Testified in Hannah Gutierrez-Reed's trial. Lisa, good to see you. Thank you so much for coming back here on Sidebar.
Thank you for having me.
So I'm going to go through this a little bit, and then I'm going to get your perspective. I just want to lay it out for the audience. So in the prosecution's filing, and I think this is fascinating, in the prosecution's filing, they say how Hannah Gutierrez-Reed is listed on defendant Alec Baldwin's witness list, right? And they believe that Baldwin wants to call her because they probably believe she has exculpatory information, meaning tending to prove he is not guilty of the crime. But the prosecution says she already submitted to a pretrial interview on May 14, 2024, where she asserted her Fifth Amendment privilege to all substantive questions. She didn't answer. So it looks like that is going to happen at trial, right? So the prosecution is like, she should be compelled to testify by being granted what is called use immunity. Lisa, let's start there. What is use immunity?
Well, use immunity is when you testify, when a person is compelled to testify, and I'm going to make it super simple, and it can't be used against them. So no matter what you say, you kind of have immunity for this particular purpose.
Could it affect her appeal? Could it affect her chances at an appeal?
Well, technically, this is a part of the law that I don't like. It's legal. What the government wants to do is absolutely legal. But because she is technically not fully convicted, she's convicted, she lost at trial, but it's almost like stayed. It's almost like in a pause while she gets her full appeal. And usually no, but this is a super high profile case. And I don't know how the Court of Appeals is not going to listen to any of that other testimony. And if she admits, it certainly seems like that would affect the appeal and affect how the jurists would ultimately rule.
Hey, everybody, I want to thank Morgan & Morgan for sponsoring today's Law&Crime YouTube takeover. If you've seen our videos, you know Morgan & Morgan is a proud sponsor of Law&Crime and that our content proves the world isn't always the safest place. You know, one of the scariest things that can happen to you is if you get injured, if you get hurt, right? Such a traumatic moment. Where do you turn? What do you do? Well, Morgan & Morgan, America's largest injury law firm, can help you out. Why? Because they are specialists in this area. They are the largest injury law firm because they win a lot. Morgan & Morgan has recently secured verdicts of $12.2 million in Florida, $26.2 million in Philadelphia, and $6.8 million in New York. All of these, by the way, were significantly higher than the highest insurance offers in these cases. Yeah, Morgan & Morgan, they don't settle for lowball offers. They fight for your legal rights and for what you deserve in compensation. They also, by the way, make it super easy for their clients because the whole process can be done straight from your smartphone. You can easily start your claim in minutes. Also, zero upfront fee. You only pay them if you win. So if you're injured, you could start your claim at forthepeople.com/YouTube takeover or by dialing #law. That's #529 on your phone. Well, let's talk about why the prosecution wants her to testify. So in their filing, it seems that they believe she will significantly help their case. Why? And why they want her to testify under immunity. They say she would testify, I'm going to list it out here, that Baldwin was not paying attention during firearms training, that he didn't show up for additional training, that Baldwin was a producer and he had free reign to do whatever he wanted, and other producers on the film had to, quote, reel him in, that he was upset, he had emotional fits, basically suggesting it was hard to control him, that he rushed her when she was loading and unloading weapons, that he wasn't supposed to be cocking the gun or pulling the trigger during rehearsal or pointing guns at people, and that Baldwin demanded a real gun be provided for the rehearsal. So, Lisa, I mean, it feels like all that testimony would be damning, no?
It sounds like it would be very damning. And it also sounds like that testimony wouldn't come from anyone but Hannah Gutierrez-Reed, because that's not what Hall said. In any way, shape, or form. Halls said that he didn't feel like the set was rushed. Halls felt that Hannah acted appropriately and Baldwin acted appropriately. So I think she's the only one that they're going to get that testimony from, and that's probably why they're compelling her to testify.
Do you think would she testify to all that? How do they know that she would testify to all that?
I think because of her prior statements of different things that she said on the set, and things that she said during the pretrial interviews done by the police. So I think those are her statements. I don't know. I don't like this. I think that it just smells wrong. It just does not seem like justice compelling someone who is still pending appeal, compelling them to testify. I don't like it. And I think it has a lot of legal implications. If she wins her appeal and her case is actually remanded back and she gets another trial for whatever reason, maybe something went wrong, the judge made the wrong decision, whatever, but her case gets remanded back, she has another opportunity to testify if she wants. But now that she's been compelled to testify, if so in the Baldwin case, then nothing she says is surprise. Nothing she says, strategy wise, I think that it hurts the defense. And if she testifies and she says something slightly different than what she says in the Baldwin trial, they can use that to impeach her. So I think
they could. So in other words, she might not be prosecuted, right, for what she says, but you're saying in a future case, if she gets a new trial, they could use her statements from the Baldwin trial to show that she's not credible, that she's inconsistent.
Well, only if she testifies. Yes.
Right. Oh, that's so interesting.
Yeah. No, they can't just take her testimony and use it in the absence of her. But yeah, if she testifies and says something even slightly different, it just doesn't seem like the American system of justice. Unfortunately, it is.
And to be clear, I think I want to emphasize this one more time. She would be compelled to testify. It's not like they would say, we're granting you use immunity. It's now in the ball's in your court, Hannah. What do you want to do? Right? If the court says she will be granted use immunity, this is saying she has to testify. What happens? Could she get on the stand and just say, I don't know? Because what's her incentive to say all of these things? Because a part of me wonders, and again, I'm no psychologist, she has to be furious that she was convicted. And, I imagine that she feels that there's other people responsible. Maybe she does want to take the stand and say all these things about what Alec Baldwin did, but I'm also wondering, does she want to? And so to be clear, she would have no choice but to testify and actually provide information.
Right. Testify truthfully. She can't get up there and take the fifth and she can't say, oh, you're giving me use immunity. No, thank you. I don't want it.
Right.
I'm not going to participate in this. No, she's compelled by law to testify. And when she takes the stand, she can't say, I don't remember, when in fact she does remember. She has to testify truthfully. I don't like it. It's a law. It is the law. I'm sure that the judge will grant it, but it sure doesn't seem fair.
I'm confused, and hopefully you can clear up this confusion for me. I understand why Dave Halse would testify for the defense. Clearly, as you said, he doesn't have the same opinion about what that set looked like as the prosecution believes Hannah Gutierrez-Reed would testify. Why was she on the defense's witness list? What kind of exculpatory evidence could she provide? Is it about something in the law as we call proximate cause, right? What exactly caused that chain of causation that caused this shooting? I don't understand what the defense would have to gain from her testifying.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I don't know why the defense put her on their witness list. I know that in my own practice, sometimes I just list everybody just to be on the safe side. It doesn't mean you're necessarily going to call them, but you identify people. And then as time goes on, you kind of in your own mind whittle them off of your list, kind of pencil them off. But you keep them there just in case something goes wrong and you've preserved the right to call them. I don't know what their strategy was. I would imagine it was something like that. She doesn't seem to be helpful. I also think that she might want Baldwin convicted.
Yeah.
And she might be exaggerating and not helpful to the defense. So I would not have listed her. Again, I don't know what the strategy was.
Let's circle back to that idea of defense witnesses in a second, because there's another issue I'm going to bring up. But I thought this was interesting. So the prosecution said if she is not granted use immunity, then Alec Baldwin would just use Hannah Gutierrez-Reed's previous statements. I'm imagining from her interviews that I played a portion of them, that they would just be allowed to present those at trial. And the idea would be, hey, we're the prosecution. We don't have ability to cross-examine her about any of the things that she said. So is the idea that those previous statements help Baldwin because she seems to accept blame or admits she wasn't thorough? Is that the idea?
I don't know about that, because you have to have a hearsay exception in order to get her statements in without her testifying. And so the question is, what hearsay exception and what particular statements would they want to get in? So whether or not those statements would come in, it's hard for me to comment on now.
I'll give you an example.
Okay.
So like statements when she was first detained, and she's like, I'm a failure. I messed up. My career's over. When in the interview where she talks about how some of the bullets were wonky. These are things I think hurt her case. And if the defense brings that in, they show that they put all the blame on her, and the prosecution doesn't have an opportunity to question her about it, right?
Right. And I think thank you for clarifying that. I can see why the defense would want those statements in, because I'm a failure and I really messed up. Those are statements of her state of mind. And she's clearly saying that she was responsible. So I can see why the defense would want that. And you're right. And they're right. The government does not have the same rights to confront and cross-examine witnesses that the defense does. So I can see why they would want those things in. But that, if it comes in on a hearsay exception, they don't need Hannah there. Mm-hmm. I am just surprised that the government is going to give her use immunity after and while her case is pending. It's legal in New Mexico, unfortunately. I wish I knew if it was legal in other states, because it just doesn't seem right.
And just to wrap a bow on this before we go to the next point, you believe that the judge is going to side with the prosecution here on both these points?
Absolutely. That this particular jurisdiction does this a lot. This is one of their styles, is that they give a co-defendant use immunity, make them testify, sometimes even before their trial. Mm-hmm. And that's something that this particular DA's office is very fond of doing. There is some case law that supports it. However, in the big scheme of things, and I've had it happen on my cases, we argue the Fifth Amendment. You have the right to remain silent. You can't be compelled to testify, but the judges are still granting it. Right. So do I think, based on the history, yes, I think the judge will grant this.
Okay, now I need your perspective on another filing. So the prosecution filed what was called a response to the defense's motion to exclude witnesses. And I find this equally fascinating. So the prosecution seems to be saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, the defense, after claiming they were going to call some witnesses, they now believe some should be excluded. The defense is saying some of their own witnesses should be excluded. And the prosecution saying, whoa, not so fast. Quote, the defendant's move to withdraw some of its witnesses was based on the fact that their witnesses actually provided information during pretrial interviews that supports the state's theory of defendant's recklessness. In fact, during his pretrial interview, Zachary Sneesby told the parties that he positively saw the defendant, Alec Baldwin, pull the trigger when he shot Halyna Hutchins. And they seem to say that now the defense is saying, this would just be prejudicial to call these witnesses that were originally on their own defense list. Walk me through this.
Okay. So Zachary Sneesby and several other people gave statements early on. As a matter of fact, our team went out, and we had an investigator that went out and did a lot of interviews before the police even got to a lot of these people. And so we had very early interviews. Well, people say one thing, and here we are years so-and-so later, and now people's stories are kind of changing. Their memories are changing. They've watched a lot of media. You get different input, and your memory kind of gets to be a little skewed. And maybe now you say something different. So they relied on things early in the case. People's stories are slightly different now. Now they don't want those witnesses. Okay, fine. But the problem is once the witnesses are identified, the government can call them and use those witnesses. So, yeah, bummer, but that's how it happens. I mean, people change their story all the time.
Is this, if you are looking at the case, is this concerning for Alec Baldwin?
Oh, definitely.
Mm.
Oh, definitely.
Mm.
But his defense has always been, I mean, of course it's a problem huge that people are identifying him as pulling the trigger. My client is not.
Right.
But the bigger thing that I think Alec Baldwin is relying on is look at the totality of the situation. Look at the fact that we're making a movie, that I relied on other people, and my analogy is kind of like when you go to the doctors. The doctor comes in, the doctor doesn't retest your blood pressure. The doctor doesn't retest your oxygen count. The doctor relied on the nurse or the technician to do their job properly. And then the doctor comes in, takes those numbers and proceeds. And that's kind of the theory I think that Baldwin's going on, is that I relied on others and everyone was supposed to do their job.
Right. And I think the prosecution is responding that he was, he went rogue. He went rogue and he wanted the gun and he was pointing at people and he was firing. And one of the other things that I forgot to mention was that one of the things the prosecution is hoping Hannah Gutierrez-Reed would testify to is that other actors perform their own safety checks. So really trying to distinguish what Baldwin did from the others. Now, before I let you go, a bit of news that I wanted your opinion on. I know you are a criminal defense attorney, not a civil litigator, but just now, the family of Halyna Hutchins has filed a 47-page lawsuit against multiple people and entities like the Russ Production Company, Alec Baldwin, Dave Halls, Hannah Gutierrez-Reed. This is, by the way, from her family, like her mom, her dad, her sister. And they're alleging assault and battery by Baldwin. They're alleging negligence. They're alleging intentional infliction of emotional distress. We know there's already been a lot of litigation in this case. Just your immediate reaction to this. I know you haven't had a time to actually look at the lawsuit, but what is your perspective on another lawsuit here being filed? And honestly, I could say I understand why it's being filed, but what's your take on it?
Well, I guess that's just the way things are nowadays, that, you can't bring Halyna back. So instead you want people to pay. And I just think, you name everybody in a lawsuit. It's kind of like the witness list I was talking about. You list everybody and then you kind of whittle it away from there. So, they file a lawsuit. They want accountability. The thing is, on this case, there's been so much accountability because of the public humiliation, as far as to Baldwin, Halls, and Gutierrez-Reed, and there's been a lot of accountability. But, they want money, and I guess that's the only way in the United States legal system that we can make people whole, is by giving them money for their loss. Mm-hmm. It's kind of just a really sad thing. I wish we could bring Halyna back.
I think everybody wants that. But look, the purpose of lawsuits many times, of course, is to compensate people for their loss, for what they suffered, and where, the criminal justice system only goes so far. Sometimes you have that civil arena. So completely understand why they filed this lawsuit. We will see what happens with it. Lisa Torraco, thank you so much for coming on. Appreciate your perspective on this. And, I would love to have you back on as this, we're right around the corner from this trial. And that is all we have for you right now here on this episode of Sidebar, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. As always, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll see you next time.